Studying. Oh. Hello. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Josh. I'm a senior here at WashU studying environmental sciences. I'm helping to moderate some of our sessions, so thank you for joining this one on resilient activism. This is workshop number 17, so if you're not wanting to be here or you want to be somewhere else. Before we begin, I want to walk through a few items both for you guys here and for those on Zoom. If you're joining us online, please keep your microphones off and use the chat function to ask any questions for Q&A and such. I'll be monitoring the chat. Also, there's going to be a recording, whether you're here or online, to go back and find that, so that'll be available in many means. And please let me introduce today's session leaders. So we have Sammy Aaron and Anne Malia. Sammy is the founder and executive director of The Resilient Activist. Anne is the programs and outreach coordinator for The Resilient Activist. They've been running this organization for 5 years or so by now. So without further ado, here we go.
Thanks so much, Josh. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. So this workshop, 4 Steps for Resilient Life, is really part of what can be a much larger intensive, much longer intensive, right? We've even done it as a full-day retreat where we really delve into these topics. So some of what we're going to do today is going to feel quick, right? A little superficial, and it's okay because you've got a full handouts available within the Whova app. It's about 12 pages. It's got all the content, all the concepts. You can take all that with you in a quiet moment out in nature. You can finish it all up, okay? So it's pretty informal, but I want to just let you know it's a really deep subject. It's this whole concept of how's our emotional health as activists, and how do we find the way to regulate that? How do we find the way to be joyful with what we do? Like, it is possible. It really is possible, but it takes a little thought, right? It's not something we're trained for. So you've all done the pre-event survey. I appreciate that. We'll have time at the end for the post-event. We are doing this as multiple research studies, and I really appreciate you're giving us a pre and post. So, The Resilient Activist, we are a nonprofit in the Kansas City area. We're about 5 years old, as Josh said, and I'm just delighted to be here. Like, this is such an amazing organization. Heather has just outdone herself with creating the Midwest Climate Collaborative. So I know we've already had a little bit of honoring native lands. I'm going to not do land acknowledgement, but we always do some indigenous teachings within our presentations and our organization. So I'm not even going to read it. I'm going to talk a little bit about a book my friend Dr. Daniel Wildcat wrote. It's called Red Alert, Saving the Planet with Indigenous Knowledge. He's a sociology professor at Haskell Indian Nations University in Lawrence, Kansas. And in the book, he talks about those 7 generations. Anybody here heard of the 7 generations, right? He tells them a little differently than what I've heard before. And he talks about the fact that where we are today comes from the 3 generations before us. And what we impact today is going to impact the 3 generations to come. So now we have that full 7, rather than what we're doing today is only going to impact the 7 generations ahead. It's this looking back, looking at the present, and looking at the future. And that's kind of where we are today. Where are you? What are you doing right now? What have you been doing? And what do you want to do? So that's the whole concept of where we're headed today. So you can all read my bio online. Basically, I'm an activist. I've been through frustration, grief, anger, joy, accomplishment, success, failure, and I would guess to say that everybody in the room here and everybody on Zoom is in the same boat. So feel free to read my bio later. Today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the emotional impact of climate change and climate activism. Being an activist and climate anxiety for activists is different than climate anxiety for the general population, right? So today's program is for activists, all right? We'll talk about what the 4 steps for resilient life are, kind of an overview, and then we're going to go through these 4 steps. It's a workshop, so those of you on Zoom, be sure you've got some writing materials. In the handout, there is on page 3, there is this tree with a heart on it, and you're welcome if you've got a printer, or you can just use a piece of paper and pretend like you have a tree with a heart on it, would be fine. Everybody here, I hope, has that with them. We'll be going through some of that. We're going to review what you've done. We're going to rejoice and celebrate what you're doing. And then we're going to talk about reflecting on those things you don't love to do and why not, and then reimagining how you might change some of your activist acts so that they become a way that feels really uplifting and joyful when you love doing them, even if they're hard, right? Even if they're upsetting. There's this concept of, I can still love what I'm doing and know I'm making a difference and still sleep at night. Right? And then we've got a whole bunch of resources for climate grief. Your handout, this 12-page handout has 2 pages of resources. So we'll talk briefly about those, and then we'll end with the final survey, which is basically the one you just took, with a couple different questions at the end. So, okay.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I didn't get a handout.
Oh.
Are there a lot of handouts?
Here, she's got it right here, and I'll get it for you. Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, the handouts are on Whova. Sorry, we only printed a couple of them, so you don't need them here today. Yeah, you'll be able to download those as a PDF. Thank you for asking. All right. So the Resilient Activists, we are a nonprofit. We cultivate resilience to environmental stress by supporting community, personal well-being, and vital ecological change. Right. So that's what we're all about. It's our goal in life is to just make climate resilience a way of being for a lot of people. So I want to define an activist. Anybody picture an activist like this, right? Angry, tense, ticked off all the time, right? That's what we typically see. And we just have a different definition. You know, we feel that activism is an art. It's the art of taking action to support, nurture, and protect what we hold dear. That's it. It's all it is, right? It is not a negative, it's a positive. It's a wonderful way of being. What's resilience? This is an article from something called Ecocyclopedia, which is a great online resource for the emotional impact of climate change. Ultimately, becoming climate resilient involves learning to cope with the difficult impacts of the climate crisis, while also being open to the possibilities for fulfillment and joy, even in a difficult time. Okay, if all we can see is that negative road into climate despair, climate destruction, we have no energy, we have no peripheral vision to see anything else, right? So it has to be an intention to begin to notice what is good and what are the possibilities, even of things we've never even thought about. So, you know, when we are in fight or flight mode, when we're angry, we don't even have all of our brain function available, right? We don't come up with bright new ideas. We're going to save ourselves from the tiger. Like, that's it. That's as far as our brains can go. So when we have practices like meditation practices, time spent in nature, time in community, this conference statistically is a tremendous emotional resilience boost just by being in community of others. Like, this is fantastic. So that's where we are with this topic. We did a research study September of 2020 with climate activists. There were 46 participants, and we asked 7 questions about how are you feeling? What's the emotion of climate change for you as an activist? And these were Zoom meetings. They were small group sessions that were recorded. This was a research study through KU, through the psychology department. And here's what we found out. This is what they experienced. So of the 46 people participating, 40 expressed sadness, 39 expressed anger and frustration, and then the rest of the scale there was just kind of across the board. This is different from the scale for climate anxiety in young people, climate anxiety for health workers, right? Activists are seeing the anger and frustration is a lot higher, but so is sadness. So whether you identify with that or not, I invite you to just kind of think about it. There are a lot of new terms available having to do with climate anxiety. There's an entire new lexicon in the mental health communities now. So eco-anxiety, I think we probably all know that term. Terra fury. We've seen recently some acts of physical destruction, right? Some artworks that people are throwing soup at. There's a lot more of that going to happen. Anger that's coming up about what's happening with the planet, and pre-traumatic stress disorder. Those of you you've got your trending and your statistics and you're like, it's just a matter of time before we're going to experience this. So it's pre-traumatic stress. Fortunately, there are some organizations now that have bubbled up in the last couple years, the Climate Psychology Alliance. All the links, by the way, are in the handout, everything that you need. The Climate Psychiatry Alliance, we are partnered with them for a lot of programming. But I want to stop for just a minute and ask the question, how is your climate activism impacting your life? Anybody have just one or two words? How's it impacted, say, your family, your relationships with your family? Anybody have anything they'd like to share? I think we have a microphone. Oh, yeah, so anybody who has noticed something, there's been this emotional something due to your activism that you'd like to just kind of throw out, a little conversation here. Anybody? Yeah.
So, in participating in like local stuff and like environmental clubs or whatever, I often end up, having these debriefs at the end of the day. You're talking about family. That's like with my mom, and obviously like through her care for her children and for future generations, it's like she kind of shares in that, and she's the director of a nonprofit in Franklin County, developmental disabilities. And so then through that, she, as like, being in a position of direction and control, has been able to kind of implement some like very forward sustainable practices, even within something that we consider like unrelated to sustainability. I think you often see like, okay, that's related to the environment, so we're going to have sustainable practices, but we also have to implement it in places that are completely unrelated, like the Department for Developmental Disabilities, so, just kind of beginning programs and getting people who, are consumed with something that's different, that's not, I guess the overlap between caring for people with disabilities and also for the environment, and being able to do both. So that was change. And it's rewarding to see that, to be like, my mom come home and be like, so we're doing like this with the utensils and whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I guess that's a good emotion that's coming out of it.
It is a good emotion, and it can be frustrating though, talking about implementing sustainable practices within climate aware, climate active organizations. Like, how do we do that, right? And we actually taught a 10-week course for the Office of Victim Services at the Kansas Department of Corrections, because their staff was in a meeting. They're all social worker types, right? They had a great meeting supporting themselves, and this was before COVID. They got up from the meeting, and one of their staff members said, we come here, we support each other, we help our own trauma, secondary trauma with working with our clients, and here we have this meeting space covered in styrofoam cups. What's that about, right? And that's exactly what you're talking about. People, everyday people, are noticing, even if it's not their focus. So that's a great point. Yeah. Someone else have an emotion, maybe to do with the martyr syndrome? Anybody feel like they are the martyr? Why should you take care of yourself when there's so much suffering in the world? Anyone experience that? And if there's anything on the chat, just also let us know. So, nobody? Yeah.
Well, personally, I've worked my way out of that syndrome, but I have colleagues who are deeply in it. Not necessarily from an environmentalism standpoint, but just from the culture and how they were raised and things like that. And it's hard work to not apologize for taking care of yourself.
It's hard, I'm going to repeat that. It's hard work to not apologize for taking care of yourself. You bet. It's really hard work.
It's okay to be just a little selfish.
Yep, and it's okay to be just a little selfish. Thank you. Is anybody familiar with the term moral injury? Anyone? Moral injury is the concept that there are things you know about, maybe things you're in a decision-making position to impact, maybe something that could cause damage, could cause harm, and there's nothing you can do about it. Right? Nothing you can do about it. Because of systems, because of politics, because of funding, because of lack of time. There are things we all experience as activists, knowing certain things are harmful, are hurtful, and we see them every day, and there's nothing we can do. This is moral injury. It's a great word to look up. It's a really interesting concept. Okay, thank you, everybody. So 4 steps for resilient life. They're really simple, okay? So we're going to review what you've been doing. We're going to rejoice with the things you've been doing that you love to do. We're going to reflect on those things you don't love, and then we're going to reimagine the ones you don't love to see what you can do. Today is going to be really high level, really quick, superficial, but this is a great practice if you would like to bundle yourself up, go out someplace really sweet in nature, have whatever you need to be really comfortable there, and go through this on your own in a really mindful, quiet practice. Can be really valuable. So step 1. So I invite everybody in the room to take, there should be some blank paper. Please take a page or two of blank paper, and those of you on Zoom can do the same. And the first thing I want you to do is write down what environmental actions do you do now. And it should be things like, what's the most important? What do you wish or you should be doing, or someone's told you should be doing, right? And what, even some minor everyday actions. So just keep writing. We're going to do about 3 minutes, and just write on one piece of paper everything that you're doing as an activist. Just a couple words on each one to kind of trigger your memory. We'll go 1 more minute and then go back and number those, if you would. Put a number next to each one. All right, So if you're not finished, obviously, you can always go back. Some of your lists are going to be pretty long, and some of you maybe are a little really focused, and you don't have that much on your list. So we're going to set that aside for just a minute. And I want to talk about just some of the ways that we present resiliency through the resilient activist. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. In our longer workshops, we go into a lot more depth. We have our 5 essentials for a resilient world, and it is basically a mindfulness practice. How do you move in the world? You reconnect with nature, you respect all life, you regreen the planet, you revamp your spending, and you replenish your resources, right? And we do this from the perspective of earth care, and we do this from this perspective of self-care also, right? Yes, question?
Is it illegal to photograph your slide?
I'm happy to have you photograph anything. And I think I can do a PDF of the presentation itself and put that on Whova, so you all can.
Or email, you recorded there?
Yeah, I can do that, or I'll try and put it on Whova also, but yes, thank you. Yeah, no, we're here to share. That's what we do. So thank you for asking though. So we teach this as a mindfulness practice and journaling, the thing called analytical meditation sometimes. But I want to talk about what's the concept? What do you mean, earth care or self-care and activism? We have this perception that self-care is activism and activism is self-care. And how can that be? Like, what does that mean? So for myself, if we take just the regreen the planet, one of the 5 essentials, my whole environmental activist, or a big portion of it, has been in restoring pollinator habitat. That's my thing. Right? And so I know when I regreen the planet, when I put in a native garden outside my window, so I can see it in all seasons, I can observe who comes there, right? What critters, I can observe the seasons, I can smell the blossoms, like those, the common milkweeds that will take over, man, they smell good, right? But boy, that feels so good, right? Self-care because I'm receiving the benefits. Earth care because I know it's good for the planet. And the more of those activities that we do, the more resilient we're all going to be. Here's the caveat for environmental activists, right? Sticking with the native plant thing. How many of you walk out of your house every single day and see nothing but invasive species? Yeah, look at the hands raised. How do you live with that? How do you drive by and go, God, is it ever are these people, who are those people? Right? And why don't they get it? And and how do you talk to them, or do you? Or what's their reaction going to be? Or, you got a homes association that's got rules. So I'm not going to go into much more than that, except to say that if you put in your own pollinator habitat, your own food forest, whatever, and it's yours, and maybe you put screens around so you don't see all the shrub honeysuckle, right? I don't care what you do. Find a way to create your own personal space that you can get to as often as you need, and you know that it's doing benefit, even if it's no bigger than this table, or if it's in 2 pots on your patio. Okay, really important. All right, so now I want you to take your list that you created in step 1, and I would like you to go through and put a nice star next to the ones that make you really happy, that are easy to do, that maybe are not easy, but you're happy to do it anyway, that you look forward to doing, you like to talk about afterwards. And then I'll ask you to take a second piece of paper when you've kind of circled or starred the ones that you like doing. And on your second piece of paper, you're going to write the numbers of the ones you just starred, and you're just going to put a little sentence about why you feel that way. Why does this make you feel good? when you do this thing. So if number 3 on your list was put in a pollinator garden, right, just put that on your second piece of paper and just write a little sentence. What is it that makes you feel good about that action? Okay, so we'll just take a minute or two for that. Yeah, let us know if anybody needs more paper or pencils, anything. So as you're writing, it can be really helpful when you're feeling overwhelmed. You're feeling like you're not accomplishing anything. You're feeling that everything that you're doing is just futile, right? Like not going to make any difference, that nobody cares, you're all alone. Like I could go on and on, right? Because a lot of us feel that way. It's just so helpful to literally see what it is you actually are doing and see how it makes you feel when you accomplish those things. Or even if you don't accomplish them, just what do you work on, right? So mindfulness practices, time spent in nature to reflect on these things are really, really valuable. Okay. So here's what I invite you to do on that page where you wrote down why you like something is rejoice. So draw some silly picture that's like what you would do to celebrate, because we don't have time to do a nice art project that we normally would do. So I'm going to invite you to design your own art project on your piece of paper, and it could be anything, and just to bring out that joy that what you're doing is of such great value, and you deserve credit for it, right? Anybody ever gotten a trophy for being a great activist? No? Nobody? Huh. Anybody ever gotten gold stars? Did you get a trophy? No.
We're just joking, because kind of,
Kind of? Cool.
for a program at our nonprofit.
Yeah, all right. That's the way the world should be in the future, right? All right, so this is the point. Celebrate what you're doing. Know that what you're doing, even if it feels like a drop in the bucket, drop in the ocean, it's still a great value, okay? All right, any comments after that? This rejoice piece, noticing what feels good, what you enjoy doing. Anybody find something that surprised them? Hadn't really thought about it before? Yeah.
I wrote down supporting others, so feeling very uplifted and warm, taking action in supporting other people who care or are endeavoring on something, even if I'm not specifically involved, just showing that I care about what they care about and showing up for them, and that they're being heard and listened to, and that what they're doing is valuable.
That's prime. Showing up and supporting others who are doing the work, letting them know how important their work is, that you do appreciate it. You know, one of the best things, I know I get choked up probably talking about it right now. I love big donations, right? We're a nonprofit. I love when someone interviews me. What I really love the most is a thank you note. That's it. Like right now. Just someone that says thank you for what you're doing. It's really prime. So thank you for what you're doing. Mutual Thank You Society. All right. Anybody else? So I'm also going to ask you to think about how you might literally celebrate. If you've gone in and done a major project and it actually came to fruition, or it didn't, get together with that community of people and just celebrate what you've attempted. You know, it's like anything else in the world, what they say for advertising, people have to hear a message. It used to be 7 times. I think it's like, 82 now. But maybe you were the first person to open that little window of idea for somebody. That's worth celebrating, right? Anything you put out there is going to have an impact, whether you will ever see the results. You will never know. I used to teach workshops in restoring native gardens and suburban lawns. And I can remember a woman that I knew from yoga came to the workshop, and I didn't hear from her, I didn't know her very well, kind of Facebook friends. 3 years later, she's posting a picture of her first monarch chrysalis. And she thanked me on Facebook, and it was like 3 years later. I had no idea the impact of that workshop, right? So you have what's the phrase, whatever other people think of you is none of your business. Here's what I'm going to rephrase that. Whatever you think kudos or acknowledgement you should be getting, that's none of your business. Your business is what's coming from your heart, from your education, from your community, and just put it out there. Because you don't know if you're just the very first trickle of information going out into that particular community, that particular elected official, whatever that might be. Okay? So we celebrated. So let's talk a little bit about how do you decide what's joyful and what's stressful? Right? Does anybody have any tools for when you notice that you're not sleeping well, or you're angry with people that you wouldn't normally need to get angry with, or your concentration level's off? Has anybody experienced some of that in relation to your climate action, where you notice there's things happening in your body? Do you have something you'd like to share? You're nodding your head.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh. So I know when I'm very stressed because I will have dreams about whatever is looming in my mind. And then I know that I'm joyful about something because I will be humming and I don't know, while I'm doing something mindless. So
I love it. Dreams about the things that you can't control or they're out of your control, and then humming when it feels good. Excellent. Anybody else notice anything in their bodies? Particular areas that you're always,
I consistently have, it's through the throat and chest region, it's just this tenseness.
Sure.
And there's definitely a range, and being able to distinguish between whether that's a positive or a negative can be difficult, and sometimes it's all of it, it's just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It's all there.
Yeah, so she's feeling it in her throat and her chest, and how do you decide if it's positive or negative? The important point is to notice it, because your body's going to inform you first of your emotional reaction. Right? And so if you're in a setting where you notice, for me, it's clenched teeth. When I notice that I am just like this, if I notice it, I can take some deep breathing. I can say, excuse me, I'll be right back. And I can go out for a walk. I can go out in the bathroom. I always like to teach this. I hope you can see this on Zoom, because this is my favorite thing to do when you're really frustrated. Anybody here familiar with lion's breath from yoga? Some of you are. Okay, this is me real pretty. This is my prettiest thing, okay? So you inhale, scrunch everything up in your face, in your hands, and let it go. Right? It's a physical practice, oh my gosh, that just releases tension. It clears out your lungs, so now you have to breathe a little more deeply, and you look really stupid and so in control, you are so in control, and now you can walk back in the room, and you're kind of in a different mindset. Those kinds of practices, mindfulness, yoga, any kind of physical movement, holistic practices, prime, okay? When you're noticing the stress in your body, in your breath, in your heart, in your words, right? Who wants to take home the stress of your job to the people that you love? Nobody. You don't want to do that. They don't need that, right? We're going to do a little exercise. Please grab your tree. Each of you should have a picture of a tree. And those of you on Zoom, again, you're welcome to just take a piece of paper and pretend like you have a tree on it. We're going to be writing quite a bit on this, so keep your handwriting small, those of you who are, pretty effusive sometimes. So this is a tree of resilient activism, and we're going to take a look at our roots, the trunk, the branches, the fruit, the leaves, and just kind of how the whole concept works through, a way to visualize what you're doing. So I'd like you to start off, there's a heart in the middle of that tree, and I'd like you to start off with just a couple words you can write next to the heart. What is in your heart? Why do you do this? Right? Just a couple words, because there's a lot of stuff we're going to write on there, but why do you do this work? Is there an emotion? Is there something that calls to you? Is this your calling? Right? And just kind of jot down some of the emotions that you feel. And again, you can take this into a deeper mindfulness practice at some point if you'd like. All right, we're going to move on. We're going to kind of quickly through this. Take a look at the roots, and I'd like you to write down in the roots, what issues do you personally care about or work on? What are your most important issues, concerns, or needs for the planet or whatever, whether you're working with people, with non-human people, with plants, animals, and so on. So what are the roots of what you do? What are the problems? And again, just a couple words. It's kind of the basis of what you do when you're activism. And then let's take a look up at the branches. What are the methods or processes that you go through in your work or your volunteerism? What connections are there? How do you reach out? That kind of thing. Like just, if you work in transportation, obviously you talk about infrastructure, or you talk about vehicles or whatever. Like what are the methods or processes that you go through up around the branches? A lot of writing on this one. That's interesting. And then the next level is the leaves. These are individuals, organizations. Who do you work with? Who do you know? Who's part of this with you? Whether they're people you know personally or people in other organizations, even around the world. You might even think about people who trained you, people who first got you interested in what you do. And then let's talk about the fruit. What is your vision? What's going to be the end game? Right? What is your vision, particularly for your particular focus, right? Whatever you work on, what would you like to see as the outcome? I know some of that's probably a little nebulous, but. So there's one area we hadn't talked about yet, and that's the trunk. In order to get from your roots, your values, what drives you, the issues are, up into all this action and activity, something has to happen in the trunk. And so that's really the connection, the communication. And so just take a little minute or so to think about, how do you communicate what are your important concerns into who you connect with, what the processes are, what the vision is. What is that kind of workflow for you? And then we get to the tree of resilient activism. This is the heart of the matter. Because here's the deal. If you don't feel good and you don't have any joy in your life and you're not resilient, then your tree's not very healthy either. Right? So the heart, I always see a tree, for me, the heart of the tree is when those first branches come out. But to me, that heart center of the tree, may be true or not, I don't know. When you really take care of yourself, right? When you feel good physically, you eat well, you're outdoors, you're with people that you enjoy, you bring more joy into your life. When you are more resilient, the tree of what you do is going to be so much more robust, right? When you're in fight or flight mode and you only have certain thoughts available, you can't possibly come up with new ideas, right? There is no innovation when it comes to fight or flight. So when you are in this space of quiet and reflection and joy, your tree is more resilient, and so are you. So what I'd like you to do on step 3 now is go back to the first list, take your paper, and take a fresh sheet of paper, and those on your first list you did not star as a happy thing to do. I invite you to start writing on another piece of paper which ones did not make you happy, and just a phrase or two about why not. And you can take a look at finances, time, physically, physiologically, how your family reacts, any aspect at all. What things are you doing that you don't love, and why not? Be honest. These will not be shared. This particular slide is really helpful after meditation. It's really helpful after any kind of holistic practice so that your heart is really open and you can be really honest with yourself. What is it about this? So for me, for example, I've always felt like I needed to be really politically active. And for me to go confront a legislator freaks me out. This is how I talk. I got nothing to say. I don't have any, I can't do it. But I can write a letter, right? I can call on the phone with a script. There's a lot of things I can do to shift what I'm doing and still impact that particular value, but in a way that doesn't stress me out. So, I invite you to continue this practice on your own. And we're going to try and see if this little video plays. And I want you to pay attention to the little rose on the right, but also the flow of how this rose blooms. So, before we go to my partner in crime, Amelia, who noticed something about the flow of how those blossoms opened? Anybody? Yeah.
It's almost like it was breathing.
Almost like it was breathing. Oh, I love that.
It wasn't straight, start to finish, it had fluctuation.
It had fluctuations. Yep. Somebody over here? I thought I saw a hand. What about the little rosebud on the right? How did it feel? It wasn't nearly as big as the other ones. It didn't open as quickly, right? And look at those other guys are doing so much better. Do you think that rosebud thinks that? Right? Why am I not keeping up with those people? Right? Do you think any of those three rosebuds said, oh, you know what? We've got a mandate to get opened by 2040. Like, let's make that happen. Right? Anybody? Right? Mine, it's just food for thought. I invite you to think about this. Those roses, they rested and then they had a burst. They rested and they had a burst. You can rest. You can retract. You can retreat until you're ready, until the time is ready for you to come up. So I'm going to invite Amelia to come up and talk about activism. And it's just that one.
Well, we're going to shift gears just a little bit. I'm not going to go through, you've had a minute to kind of look at my bio, but I came to the Resilient Activist, I know Sammy a long time, and I came to the Resilient Activist really in 2020 when everything just crashed. And I realized I had done all this stuff and I wasn't being resilient. And I'm grateful that I knew Sammy and was able to kind of come to that and bring that into my activism. But for me, I feel like I've always been an activist when you define it as the art of taking action to protect what you hold dear, because that can mean a lot of different things, like your family. So it can be small, it can be big. So anyway, I think that's, for me, that's really important. One of the things that I've been an environmental activist for a really long time. I live in Kansas. And I've lived in Kansas my whole life, and that can be really frustrating. It's changing. We have done some really great things here in the last year, but I realized that all of these environmental actions that I was taking, we fought a coal plant in the mid-2000s, and we were successful in convincing people that we didn't need to build that coal plant. I realized that I had to get more politically active because I actually had to work hard to elect like-minded people who actually cared about the same things that I did if that was going to change. So for me, that was really kind of this wake-up call all the way down from city council representatives all the way up to state and federal elections. So I'm not gonna go over all of these, but what some of you may be part of these things, but one of the things that we do as part of the Resilient Activists is we've had this presentation on political engagement because a lot of people think political is a bad word and don't want to engage. And what we want to show is that there's lots of different ways to engage and lots of different ways to make a difference. And so these are all things that I have done and think are important. And I'm one of these people that actually likes to knock doors and talk to people, and I'm okay to talk with people that aren't in my same party, who may not always agree with me. Sometimes that's really hard. That's why you have to be resilient and have that, because some of that could be difficult. But I found that it makes a difference. So that's something that's important to me to be a part of. Then there's other kinds of political actions, and one of the things, I'm a person who's served on a lot of boards, and I think that makes a really big difference. But, you can see here, there's things like, your homes association, and we're working to encourage people within our community to try to get some of those things changed so that they can have native gardens. And, you can always, like, I serve on our solid waste management committee in my county because that's what my background is in. And so it's sort of stealth because I'm worked in consulting, but I come in because I'm sort of an activist. So there's ways that you can, support those political actions that you might not think about. And I guess those didn't really, I don't know why, sorry about that. Anyway, and then this kind of comes into, the native gardens. I have a native garden. I live on a corner. It's not a busy corner, but it's amazing to me what happens. People walk by. I have yard signs for political candidates and causes, which gets people talking, but mostly it's my garden. And I get to tell them about my native garden and what it does, and they can see the butterflies and that. And it's not a big garden, but it's enough that people walk by and they say they love it, and it really makes a connection in my neighborhood. You can kind of see some of these other things. I'm a big one on reading books and getting encouragement, and I love Brene Brown, and this kind of goes in, one of the things that's super hard for me is setting boundaries. I don't ever want to disappoint anybody, and I think that when we're in activism, when we're in nonprofits, we're in government, whatever, you feel like you have to do everything and you're going to let somebody down if you say no, and it's important to understand that you have to do that. And then I don't know how many of you are familiar with Karen Walrond. She is the author of the Lightmakers Manifesto, which I highly recommend that book because it's really encouraging, because she believes that your activism should be beautiful and you should have joy and beauty in your life as an activist, and you need to find a way to cultivate that. And for me, this idea that having integrity, I left my job a few years ago because I just couldn't balance who I was with what I was doing. And it wasn't I was doing anything unethical. It was just that it didn't feel, I wasn't in the right space for me. And I think sometimes that's really important. If it isn't something that feels right for you, like Sammy was talking directly to her elected officials, isn't right for her, it's not going to go so well. And it's really okay to let that go, but that's essential, for having meaningful activism. And then you have to have courage. But if you're courageous, it is a contagious thing. So if you go out and do it, I've got a lot of my friends that knock doors now, and sometimes maybe they just are coming with me, but they're willing to do that because they're like, wait, and I'm a total introvert. And they're like, if Anne can do it, well, I'm pretty good at talking to people. I can do that too. So you never know how you're going to influence somebody when you get out there and you're contagious, with your courage. And also in our organizations, when we speak up, sometimes maybe you're not going to affect change, but you never know how that information is going to be received when you put it out there. And then this whole idea of just figuring out what's yours to do. And this is kind of Sammy's thing of, why you went through these steps today, looking at it and really kind of trying to sort out what is yours to do. And Karen Walrond's book is helpful in that too, of just figuring it out, and then you have to let go of the rest of it. It's really difficult sometimes. I'm getting all these emails and they're like wanting me to submit testimony or wanting me to do this or that or whatever, and some days it's like I just can't do that. Other days maybe I have space. You have to really kind of figure it out, and it has to go, and you can't sit there and dwell on it, because that's part of what makes us not resilient, because it brings more anxiety. And these are all things I'm speaking to myself as much as anybody else. I'm really still learning and really struggling with this. And then just thinking about evaluating those actions, and this is really more for the perspective of getting off of the bench. All of you are already out in the game for the most part, but we have a lot of folks that are, maybe more hesitant. And what I want to say is, you may see that it's best to say no to something, but what are the kinds of good consequences? What are the good things that could happen to you if you actually said yes? Who are you going to meet? What connections are you going to make? It also works the other way, and sometimes it's really good to say no. So I always kind of use this as I'm using consequences of saying yes, positive, saying yes, negative, saying no, positive, saying no, negative, and then really kind of doing that as I'm trying to figure out what my steps are going to be, because there's just way too many things that come at us, and we simply can't do all of them. So that's it.
Thanks, Ann. Any comments or questions about that? You're getting surveys now, but they're not to be completed yet, please. Until we finish, we'll have some time before we go. And there should be a link. This is the post-event survey. But any comments about that, about talking about what can be political, what can be considered activism in terms of your life and ways to be resilient with that? Anybody have any thoughts? Yeah.
I was just gonna say that I've tried really hard to understand the seasons of my life and when certain gifts were given to me and how I need to use them at certain points. So for example, I used to be very politically active, and now I've had the great fortune that I do some of that in my day job. So it also means that I set more boundaries about my personal time, because I spend so much of that during my work hours. So just thinking about how to let go of things, and maybe I circle back to it later, but it's just trying to balance that.
So I love that, looking at the seasons of your life, yeah, and how things change, your personality changes, your finances change, your relationships change, like what is valuable for you right now, and what can you let go of? Thank you, that's really insightful. Anybody else? Yeah.
I liked how there was a spectrum of actions you can take, because I am asked to do the testimony or to go in person, and I feel that strong urge to do it, but it would mean giving up more than I can. So having those alternatives, like doing one from recordings or calling, emailing, writing, those I can do.
Absolutely, the spectrum of what you can do. And sometimes baking cookies for the protesters with happy faces on them or whatever, it's prime, like it is really important. Anything that you can do that makes you happy, that's going to help someone else appreciate what they're doing, right? It's prime. I love the spectrum. That's a great term for that. Let's talk about building your resilience. So you have in the handout, it is up on Whova, we have these, some coping skills, some psychological tips and tricks that we've received with working with psychologists from both KU as well as Kansas City University, which is the osteopathic medical school. And so they're in your handout. I'm not going to go into too much about them right now, but each one is a way to evaluate how you're feeling, how you're reacting, what can you do. So things like that lion's breath, that comes in the tip skills, which is changing your, when you're really stressed out, changing your temperature. So, put an ice pack on yourself, changing the intensity of your movement or the intensity of what you're doing, paired breathing, and there's also some other different breathing practices. So it's a paired relaxation. So these are ways to get you, if you're like really freaking out, and there are people that are, right, within this movement, these are some ways to calm you back down. Reaching out for help template is really helpful. So for people who have something to say, and you're just like, God, I don't want to say it. You know, I went through this trying to be vegetarian, and it was a long story, but I just had this thing for chicken. Like whatever it was, who knows? I love chicken, but trying to explain to my husband what kind of chicken would be okay to buy, because he's the one that does all the cooking, didn't go over well. He's like, what are you talking about? Either you eat chicken or you don't. And I literally took it to my meditation mat. Had I had this reaching out for help template, would have helped me formulate how I wanted to express it to him. And what came out was, what I want is to eat chicken that was humanely raised. I want to eat chicken that was raised without chemicals. Because for some reason I couldn't give it up. So what can I do then to help myself reimagine, right? That one activism thing that I thought I needed to be vegetarian, how can I reimagine that and reframe it? So that's that reaching out for help template is really helpful. And I want to just preface this a little bit. We're not talking about just frustration and disappointment and, feeling a little overwhelmed. There are times when we're talking about deep depression. We're talking about absolute overwhelm. We're talking about doom scrolling. We're talking about increased incidences of depression, clinical depression, suicide, the whole gamut of addiction. Right? There's a lot of ways that you can handle your emotional impact, and not all of them are healthy, right? And that is rampant within the climate activist community. So one of our taglines is, the world needs visionary activists who have the resilience to see us through these difficult times. When I take a look at the number of employees of the EPA that quit, let's just say a couple years ago, y'all can figure out why. That's not good for the country. That's not good for the planet. That's not good for the earth, right? Those people, now we're like, those people, they need to find that resilience. We need that education, that experience, that background. Right? So anyway, RAIN is a practice of radical compassion. It's a meditation practice. There's a lot of links where you can listen to videos. Coping contingency plan is, every time I'm in this situation or with those people, here's what I end up doing. And I hate it. I don't want to be that person, or I don't want to have that reaction. What can I do? So it helps you plan what your course of action might be every time you're in that situation, right? It's just food for thought. And then we have a ton of resilience resources for you. So let's take a look at step 4, reimagine, and I invite you to take your list from step 3, the things you don't love and why not. And we'll just take a few minutes to visualize what you might change about them. Is there anything that you have on that negative list that you could just decide, I'm going to do it a different way, I'm going to do it with somebody, I'm going to do it less, or I'm going to do it from a different perspective? I'll let you kind of write that down for a little bit. And one of your options is to quit doing it. What? Can you really not do that thing anymore? And I'll tell you, if there's something you think you're the only one that can do, right? You have to be the one to do that thing, even if it stresses you out. Google it. I'll bet you there's more than one person working on that same issue, right? Reach out to those people, send them thank you notes, make a donation, quit doing it yourself, right? It's an option, because these days, globally, there are a bazillion people in this movement, right? There's somebody working on everything. Okay, you get the gist? All right. So, review what you're doing, rejoice at the things you've been doing, reflect on what you don't like and why not, and reimagine it. So before we go to this, let's have a little conversation. We've got a few minutes of reflection. Anybody have just some food for thought, what you might take home with you? Anne, are you able to look at the Hoovit chat if there's anything in there? Nothing in there, okay.
I'll just check.
Yeah, over here.
I think, like, I think in combination with a lot of things that you said, I don't know if this is actually pushing.
Oh, is that on?
It doesn't matter. I'll project.
Okay.
Okay. In combining a lot of the things that you said, and even like, because now that I'm thinking about it, it is kind of similar to those roses. It's just like, when there's something that's unenjoyable, it's like, well, maybe it's unenjoyable now, but I just have to adjust slowly, and just being able to work with yourself or find, like you said, like the middle ground. Like one of those practices is like, you know, there's reducing usage and like cold shower, like things that have to do with energy. It's like those things are around because they're comfortable. And so being able to maybe have those resources on days when it's needed and then taking them away when you are stronger. So like kind of being able to do both.
Absolutely. There's some days when you just really need a hot shower. You really do, right? We all do. It's like, as human beings, we need that comfort or whatever it is without guilt. Oh, what? Without guilt? How does that work, right? And so that's the day you save the water as your, in your watering can in the kitchen sink to make up for that little bit of extra water. Like there's this mindset of today, my body, my heart, my mind needs something. And here's what I need. So thank you for that. Yeah. Who else? Yeah.
So on that same topic, I attended a workshop a little while ago, similar. And you guys talk about particularly environmentalism and climate change communication, where I spend most of my space, as being superheroes and having a cape on, and that it's okay to take your cape off because lots of other people have their cape on. So you can take a turn. You don't have to keep it on. That was a really powerful thing. When we did that.
Yeah, I love that superhero image. There is this concept of occupational identity, which is another great phrase to look up, because we are environmentalists. So if you're in the mindfulness community, they would say, if you're in grief, you would say, grief is here. Like I'm not grieving, but grief is here with me, right? That's not how it works in this community. I identify, that's who I am, there's arrows pointing, right? And so that can just be really so overwhelming. So thank you for that. Yeah, you all have permission to take your capes off, share them with other people, put them in the closet, go on vacation somewhere really sweet out in nature. So who else? Any other comments?
I get asked a lot, and I don't think people put a whole lot of thought into it. Just, would you like to serve on a panel? Would you like to moderate something? Would you like to speak and be the voice for something? And that can be really exhausting, particularly when I'm trying to achieve a lot of things, not just talk about them. And so one of the things I've been trying to do more, and this sort of really made me more mindful of, is shifting that into a space of saying, okay, I see what you're wanting, your objectives are in this conversation. I'm going to tell you 2 or 3 people that I think would be excellent in making those comments. So just try, and in my own work as well, just letting those folks be the voice as opposed to always feeling like I have to articulate those thoughts.
Beautiful. In 2 words, setting boundaries.
Yes.
Set your boundaries. Like, I'm not going to do this anymore. We get it all the time, the resilient activists. People have some really cool ideas out there. And I'm like, okay, we'll jump, it's a bling, like it's shiny. Oh, let's do this, because it's all valuable, right? It's all, how do you decide? And there's just this moment where you're like, okay, I'm gonna look at my schedule, like my capacity. We actually have this circle of things that does this new idea meet our mission? Does it meet our values? Does it meet our capacity? Do we have the resources for it? Does it hit our diversity requirements? Does it, I forget, there's one more, but it's like you just have to have a way to help you set your boundaries. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. All right. So this little guy really wants you to fill out the post-event survey. Yeah, who could say no, really, right? So you either have it on paper on your desk, or you're welcome to do the QR code. I hope it came through on the Whova chat. I don't know, but you can always capture it, I think, from the Zoom call. So we'll give about 5 minutes for you to do the post-event survey. For those on Zoom, if you're not able to get the post-event survey, we'll get that link and put it in the on the same page as this event, and we'll post that a little bit later. So. kind of fun watching people nod their heads. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. To answer the questions. Just give it about another minute, and you can always finish later if you haven't finished. And at the bottom of that survey, we'd love your testimonials. You'd be welcome to connect with us through Whova or send an email. You know, if you have something deeper, longer, more verbose, we would love to hear that too. So I'm going to go ahead and go on. Let you know a little bit about what we have at the Resilient Activist. We have a monthly JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Book Club, meets the third Tuesday night of the month on Zoom. We have our Climate Cafes, the fourth Tuesday of the month on Zoom in the evening. We're going to host one tonight, I don't know where, but I kind of set up a meetup group, if any of you are interested, at 8 o'clock tonight, and I think we'll just meet in the main, like the registration area, and then we'll find a space to go to. So if anybody wants to come, be real different from this, just more informal conversation, maybe a little stretching, a little kind of getting rid of some of that tension. I'm considering a Sunday morning stillness meditation as a membership, and so there's a sign-in sheet. I know a lot of you signed in when you came in, but there's a couple of categories if you want to check off. Might you be interested in attending a Sunday morning meditation on Zoom? And just check that and let us know. We're trying to get a survey on that. We have a full range of Speakers Bureau presentations. So Ann does one on political activism from a resilience perspective. We have some deep nature connections, especially for outdoor interpreters that we do for parks and rec departments. We have a deep mindfulness practices teaching people about meditation and how they can incorporate that. And then, of course, going through that 5 essentials for a resilient world. We just kind of run the gamut of all of that. We also have an online community, Mighty Networks. It's kind of a safe social media space. We have about almost 400 members right now. It's free, and it's just a place to go online. All these links are in that handout, or even on our homepage, there's a button kind of near the top that says join our online community. But we host our classes through there. It's places you can post articles and links. You can communicate and connect with people. And it's kind of grouped by topic. You know, there's one for meditation. There's one for native plant aficionados. There's one for climate anxiety, you know, kind of all these different categories. So love to have you join that. We have this workshop as an intensive, as I mentioned. We will have a couple public ones during Earth Month. So during April, we'll have some on Zoom. But we also do these for specific groups or organizations. So if you have a particular community that you'd like to bring us in to do a presentation, it can be really customized or focused for what your group is experiencing or going through or whatever. And so we'd be happy to work with you on that. And we have a sliding scale of pricing from grassroots to, you know, we'll do our best to do it for nothing, to nonprofit pricing, to government pricing, and so on. So we have this mindfulness and resilience training. It's a 10-week course. It's a deep intensive in mindfulness practices and a lot of psychological well-being practices. And we actually, so what's in your handout, we actually practice those things and take time to really work through examples and ideas within your life. And it's really deep community building. That's one of our research studies. And by the way, I have a handout on the table that has a QR code to the different research studies we've done. And that one was, every one that we've done so far has been really statistically increased benefits for emotional well-being. So we're still pretty young with what we're doing, but we're happy to have that happen. So the thing with our research studies, if there's anybody here in a position, we really would like to take both the 4 steps, this particular workshop, as well as our mindfulness and resilience training to a bigger audience. You know, really have it as an IRB, to have a better funded, because, you know, our funding has been all volunteer and in-kind donations. It's been great. And to take them to a wider audience. So if you know anybody that might be interested, just have them reach out to me and we can connect them with the researchers that have done our small studies, and we're calling them pilot project studies. Support our work. Yeah, we would love to have corporate sponsors of all stripes. Anything that we can do to help promote what you're doing in some way, and you can just reach out to us about making a donation. Of course, individual donations, we'll take those. And this guy wants you to contact us, right? So feel free to reach out. We're just really happy to be here. And I just want to ask, I can have 2 people. Any comments, questions before we go? Because I have one more slide and one thing to say. Anybody? Okay, we're quiet. Here's the slide. There is something positive out there. So if you're not familiar with the legend of the prophecy of the eagle and the condor, this kind of came out of Pachamama Alliance. In ancient days, there was this prophecy that humanity was going to go off in 2 directions. And one was going to be the direction of technology, intellect, statistics, right? And the other group of people were going to stay with the indigenous wisdom, land use, deep connection and spiritual connection to nature. And the prophecy said that turns out to be the 1990s, they're going to come back together, because that's what it's going to take. There is no one technology that's going to make the difference, right? There's no land reclamation or teaching people how to grow certain things that's going to make the difference. It's going to take all of us through all fields, through all aspects of our activism and our heart and our human bodies that need healthy soil, that need healthy water, right? It's all of that, and that spiritual connection of just loving the earth, using our brains, using our intellect, using everything that the eagle side, the intellectual group have risen to, because people want it. Like, we love hot showers. Like, what did that take, right? What a great technology, right? And how can we do that in deep connection with water? So that's where we are. I'm just really grateful for all that you all do. I'd love to have you on that survey form if you'd like to go check. Are you interested in knowing more about any of our programs, or interested at all in a Sunday morning meditation? And then anything else, just let us know. So thank you all very much.
I just want to mention the next. Josh wanted me to remind everybody that the box lunches are downstairs, starting at 12:30, which it's 12:31, so they should be ready. And then the mobile workshops will be meeting in that main area and heading out at 1. So
they'll be meeting in the other lobby, right? Do you know? Does anybody know? Were we registered?
Yeah.
Okay, well, good luck, everybody, because we don't know where we're going.
Say where. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, please you can just leave the surveys. We'll get them.